The war in Ukraine has brought changes to the world. Do you think it has changed the balance of power and strategic alliance of the major powers in the world so far?
NATO is no longer considering itself a purely regional and European defense attack. It actually considers peace and stability in Indo-Pacific a part of its new mission as well.
But has Xi Jinping heeded the warning?
Personally, I don't think Xi Jinping is even teachable of any lessons.
Dr. Miles Yu, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's top China advisor, nevertheless suggests that Xi learns two things.
Bullying a small country will never work. The United States and its allies are determined to defend Taiwan.
And his words to Taiwan is,
never give in to threat and bullying.
Dr. Yu, thank you so much for joining Zooming In today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here with you again.
Okay, so I know a new China Center was just formed at the Hudson Institute last month, and you are the director of it. Can you tell us a bit more about this center? Why was it formed? What is it going to do? And how is it going to be different from other China-related think tanks in DC?
Let me answer your last question first. The China Center at the Hudson Institute is unlike other think tank centers in Washington, in that it is a product of a unique moment in U.S. history when America's attitude, understanding, and resolve to face a formidable challenge that is the Chinese Communist Party has reached an unprecedented national consensus. Political forces from all sides, left, center, and right, have all agreed on this historical shift, which is almost 180 degrees, of our national policy toward communist China. The crux of this unprecedented national consensus on China is the end of a misguided era of engagement and appeasement to the CCP, and the beginning of a national awakening to the intention, capabilities, and opportunities of the Chinese Communist Party. The party has used different ways to upend the free and democratic global system and to replace it with the autocratic model of governance led by the Marxist-Leninist Chinese Communist Party, a party that has been, to be frank, enabled and empowered by our decades of naive engagement and unprincipled appeasement. So the central mission of the China Center at Hudson is therefore to promote and preserve this historic national consensus on China, to prevent it from becoming another victim of partisanship. So another unique feature of Hudson's China Center is that many of my colleagues associated with the center are the veterans of the revolutionary change of our China policy during the Trump administration. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, for example, works with us in the capacity of the China Center chairman of the advisory board. I myself was deeply involved in that China policy revolution during the Trump administration. We will do our best to ensure a policy continuity, help the current and future American administrations, no matter which party it may be, with our expertise, experiences, and recommendations, so that American democracy will withstand the CCP's challenge, and we will win the strategic competition for freedom, human rights, and the rule of law.
Right. Talking about this historic moment in the U.S.-China relations, one of the geopolitical events that has a major impact on China is the russo-ukrainian war. So what is your overall assessment of the war? Was it avoidable in your opinion? And do you think it has changed the balance of power and strategic alliance of the major powers in the world so far?
I think all wars are waged with certain kind of ideas behind it. I think that Russia has long held a dangerous idea. And so that idea has not really been refuted sufficiently. Therefore, I see the war coming as sort of, expected. Now, what is the idea? Well, Russia's war against Ukraine is completely unjustified. It reflects an antiquated imperialistic Russian mentality that All peoples of other sovereign nations who may have shared historical, ethnic, or even linguistic ties with Russian culture should be ruled by the Moscow-centered civilization state called Russia. So this justification for aggression in Ukraine is very dangerous, and it is exactly what the Chinese Communist Party is advocating for in the context of Taiwan. Russia and the CCP share exactly the same absurd warmongering logic. Both Moscow and Beijing are saying that history, ethnicity, and language should determine political sovereignty and territorial belongings, but not political independence, popular elections, and international law. So this Chinese and Russian thinking must be stopped for the sake of world peace and international stability. Now, you asked me another aspect of the war, that is, what does it mean? Well, the war in Ukraine itself has rendered profound lessons to all, both aggressors and the aggressed. To the aggressors, it has really become a perfect case of global rallying, of tremendous moral and material support for Ukraine and Taiwan against the naked threats of invasion and subjugation. Just as a very familiar Chinese saying goes, 得道多助，失道寡助. A just cause attracts great support, and unjust one finds little. Because of this Russian-Chinese joint venture of aggression, these two countries are extremely isolated morally, internationally. And China is warned that if it does the copycat act by invading Taiwan, China will be sanctioned, boycotted, and resisted severely and debilitatingly. So I would say, another important consequence of the war in Ukraine is that it has really taught the victimized and threatened small countries like Taiwan that they must have their own indigenously strong national defense forces. But most importantly, never give in to threat and bullying. Only when a nation shows its resolve and tenacity for self-defense can great international military support make any difference. With strong self-defense and great military assistance from allies, Taiwan will prevail. So I think, in the end, freedom and democracy will win.
Okay.
So, but you asked me also about whether the war in Ukraine has changed global balance of power. My answer is not really. Despite Russia's brutal war in Ukraine, I think the international consensus that the CCP is the world's #1 threat still remains. Not only that, I think that because of the war in Ukraine, global major power players have even deepened the existing strategic perspective by viewing the CCP as even more dangerous because of its closer and closer relationship with Russia. Not just in Europe, but more importantly, in the Indo-Pacific as well. Well, I think this is happening because the world knows that Russia is kind of less advanced economically and technologically than the CCP. Let me just make this very clear. China's economy is more than 10 times bigger than Russia's. It has much more advanced asymmetrical weapon platforms in emerging new frontiers of modern warfare. So that's why we have seen that for the first time, a global multilateral collective defense grand alliance is slowly but steadily taking shape, with China and Russia at the center of its preoccupation. For example, NATO is no longer considering itself a purely regional and European defense pact. It actually considers peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific a part of its new mission as well. And this is pretty amazing. You can see that in a recently concluded NATO summit in Madrid, Spain, for example, for the first time ever, leaders of key Indo-Pacific democracies, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, are invited to take part in. And the NATO's 2022 strategic concept specifically mentioned this PRC as one of its strategic security priorities. And that is pretty amazing. So that's why I say the war in Ukraine has not really changed global power balance, and China, not Russia, continues to be the world's biggest security threat.
In your early part of the answer, you talked about whether the Taiwanese people are ready for a possible CCP aggression. I want to talk about that a little bit more later. But for now, I have another question. Regarding the war, some analysts say from now to winter is a critical time for how the war would turn out. America and Europe should provide enough heavy weapons to Ukraine for them to launch an offensive to turn the dynamics of the battlefield around. Otherwise, when winter kicks in, the ban on Russian energy will put Europe in a very difficult situation, which might undermine their resolve to keep supporting Ukraine and keep the sanctions in place. However, America and Europe are not determined. Those analysts, America and Europe are not determined to let Ukraine win before winter. They're not providing enough heavy weapons. What is your opinion on this?
Well, I think, I might challenge the sort of the premises of some of your questions a little bit, but let me just try to answer this way. I think European countries are realizing the importance of energy independence more and more. They're trying not to be blackmailed by Russia for energy supply. However, I do not believe Russia is the number one factor in Europe's energy crisis. It is a crisis, it is a problem, but it's not the biggest one. I think the real problem with Europe's energy crisis is extreme left-wing woke politics. Germany, for example, is most vulnerable to Russia's energy blackmail. That's because German leaders for many years have purposefully neglected its energy independence, gone woke with over-reliance on limited renewable energy sources, basically solar and wind. Solar and wind can never supply enough to meet Germany's national energy demands. So Germany has to rely on Russia. However, you don't hear much about the French worrying about their winter's energy shortage. That's because about 85% of France's energy comes out of its own nuclear power plants. In other words, France has energy independence, therefore making France far less susceptible to Russia's energy blackmail. But nuclear power plant is considered not politically correct in Germany, and the Germans are now in trouble. But I think they should really blame themselves more, not just the Russians. About energy shortage and the war in Ukraine, I think the winter harshness is a double-edged sword for both sides of the war. It might be tough for the Ukrainians and its allies in Europe, but it may even be a bigger problem for the Russians. Let's just say it this way: if the Russians in good weather couldn't win the war, how could we expect them to do better in harsh winter conditions? With Europe's legendary winter muddiness and a snowy mess, Russian tanks, armored vehicles, and soldiers may well be further and further stuck, becoming Ukrainians sitting ducks for target practice.
That's interesting. I want to ask you a couple more questions on that, but let's just go to the biggest question. This has a lot to do with Xi Jinping. What do you think Xi Jinping has learned from this war so far?
Well, personally, I don't think Xi Jinping is even teachable of any lessons. But if I were Xi Jinping, I would be aware of the following. Number one, bullying a small country will never work, as the small will gain more inner strength and external support, becoming much stronger and more lethal in the end. Number two, the United States and its allies are determined to defend Taiwan, especially after Putin's aggression in Ukraine, because the world has realized once an act of aggression started, a chain of aggression may follow, and Taiwan should not be allowed to be the first link of war of aggression in the Indo-Pacific. Number three, there are great limits in modern warfare because there are many variables. China may look strong, but it has great weaknesses and vulnerabilities too. So a war of aggression against Taiwan may not really be that easy to win. So you ask how the war impacts Taiwan's strategies. I think the biggest impact is that the previously rampant defeatism and capitulationism has been further discredited in Taiwan. The free and sovereign people of Taiwan are now more united, and the freedom's cause has indeed formed a united front in Taiwan's defense.
So, yeah, you answered this question. So I was gonna ask you, but I'm glad you already answered. So you think this war has strengthened Taiwan's defense strategies?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you think the Taiwanese people are mentally and physically prepared for a potential military aggression by the CCP now?
More so than ever.
Okay, than ever. But are they really are they prepared enough? If the CCP is going to launch an aggression right now, are they ready?
Well, it's very hard to put a simplistic yes and no answer because the wars are basically kind of unpredictable. But I see Taiwanese people are more and more together. They have gained a much broader consensus on the survival of the nation, what's really at stake, and most importantly, I think Taiwanese people are realizing more and more that they will get much more support from the international community. That's because, as I said earlier, many people, particularly countries around China, you can see Japan, Australia, even Vietnam, many people view the China threat against Taiwan is just the beginning of the China aggression. If China takes Taiwan, who knows might be next? Senkakus, the South China Sea, China might fight a war with Vietnam, with India. So this is the reason why Taiwan's cause has gained so much more support. Most of them sort of tacitly, but some of the leaders in China's periphery actually have said openly they will come to Taiwan's defense in the case of the war.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. I want to talk about the CCP's 20th National Congress. The party's conclave is going to happen in October this year. And there's a lot of speculations on whether Xi Jinping will get a third term and whether China's reform-oriented forces, represented by Premier Li Keqiang, will chip away some of Xi Jinping's power. So what do you make of the top power struggle politics in China right now?
Well, you use a very good word, conclave, which implies secrecy and furtiveness. I mean, that's exactly what the Chinese Communist Party politics is all about. It's very undemocratic. It's very non-transparent. You asked me the question, the result, Li Keqiang up or down, Xi Jinping in or out. You know what? I don't know, and I don't care. What's going on inside the Byzantine labyrinth of the CCP power struggle, inside the ruling elites, should never be the Chinese people's top preoccupation. I know the CCP has exerted an iron grip over the Chinese people, but if the Chinese people do not play into the CCP's game and consider the CCP intellectually irrelevant, then we will see real progress in China. To me personally, whether Xi Jinping stays or gets out, whether Li Keqiang gets in or out, it doesn't really matter. They are all communists dedicated to one and only objective, that is to preserve the longevity of the CCP dictatorship. We should also keep in mind, even the most reform-minded Chinese communist leaders, such as Deng Xiaoping, would never hesitate for a split second in ordering the massacre of the Chinese people, just as what happened in 1989 Tiananmen Square. So the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre should have awakened up the Chinese people to this simple fact. For the CCP to prolong, the Chinese people must suffer and die. There's no other arrangement.
I know you had a deep memory and a lot of thinking regarding the Tiananmen massacre happened in 1989. Can you just tell me a little bit before and after, like how your thoughts on China have changed because of the event?
I think many people who experienced the 1989 momentous events in Tiananmen and elsewhere, like Eastern Europe and Soviet Union, all share something in common. And that common experience is this. That is, communist rules all have something similar. That is, they rule people with fear. They instill tremendous fear to its people. So people were afraid of doing this and doing that. They were afraid of that was speaking up. So the true meaning of Tiananmen movement is that for 7 weeks, people of China centered in Tiananmen Square or more or less free of fear instilled by the Chinese Communist Party. Those were the freest 7 weeks in the history of the Chinese communist regime. So I think that's why, even though it's a short-lived 7 weeks of glory, but the 7 weeks gave a lot of people freedom, and an individual who tests freedom, no matter how briefly, would never be the same person again. That's why Tiananmen is a momentous moment, not just for any particular individuals who actually participated in that, but also it's a moment of awakening to a generation of people, even though generations to follow. And that's also why the Chinese Communist Party has done its utmost best to wipe out any memory, any commemoration of the Tiananmen movement. And that's a tragedy. Our job as an individual citizen of the world is to keep the memory alive and to understand and appreciate the true meaning of the Tiananmen movement of 1989. That is freedom. So I think the freedom can mean many things to many people, but that's my understanding.
Right. And do you think China will ever regain its freedom?
Oh, yeah. I remember in one of the most moving moments in my memory, right after, in the immediate aftermath of Tiananmen, was the American singer Joan Baez. She composed a very emotionally charged song. And I think the song, the lyric repeats over and over again. It says basically simply that China shall be free.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Yu. Do you have, these are all my questions. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, good luck with your program, and thank you for having me today.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.